Good evening, everyone, from the Ward Beecher Planetarium. Welcome back to another Cosmic Conversations. My name is Tiffany Bulbrick, and joining me this evening is Eleni Hunsick.
Hello.
Eleni, thanks for joining us today. We have a very interesting and still sometimes a little bit controversial topic in astronomy. We're going to talk all things Pluto, and there's a lot to talk about. So if you're watching, I see a couple of folks on now. Let us know where you're coming from, and if there's any questions you have about Pluto or anything like that, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. We're watching to see if you have anything to contribute to the conversation. But I think to kick us off, Eleni, do you want to talk a little bit about the history of Pluto?
Yeah. So the history of Pluto is really, really interesting. The discovery actually took quite a while. So starting in the mid 1800s, astronomers thought that something was influencing Neptune's orbit. They thought it was pretty big. They called this hypothetical object Planet X. And in the early 1900s, a guy named Percival Lowell built the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, and he started a project to search for Planet X. And that was in 1906. And the search went on for years. A few years later, Percival ended up passing away, and no one wanted to continue the search because they weren't finding anything. But his wife insisted that they keep going, so they hired a guy named Clyde Tombaugh, who spent years looking at pictures of the sky and looking for anything that looked just like a star but would move across the pictures from night to night. So they would take pictures of the same part of the sky and look for something that was moving, and that would tell them that what they were seeing is probably a planet. Finally, in 1930, 24 years later, Clyde Tombaugh saw something. So they thought this was their Planet X, but they were able to figure out that it was actually a lot smaller than they expected, but nonetheless, it was a new planet. And even back in the 1930s, astronomers love to ask the public what to name things. You see this with the Mars rovers too, or any missions.
Yeah, NASA's always having some naming contest, right?
Yeah, they love to have people send in names for stuff. So they did this even back then in 1930, and they wanted suggestions for what to name this new planet. They got lots of good suggestions, over 1,000, which was a lot at the time. And the name came from an 11-year-old girl named Venetia Burney, and she chose the name Pluto after the Roman god of the underworld, which is just the Roman version of the Greek god Hades, because she thought Pluto's so far away from the sun, it must be a really dark, cold planet, so the god of the underworld is very fitting. And they really liked that because the first two letters of Pluto, PL, are Percival Lowell's initials, so they thought that would be a good tribute to him.
I love that. And planets, you can Google this if you're curious, if you haven't seen this, but planets have symbols associated with them, and Pluto's symbol is like a little PL. I can probably draw it. But I like that because I didn't realize that story for a long time, and that like a little girl named this planet, right? Because all the other planets are named after Roman gods, so you just kind of take for granted that Pluto is a Roman god too, kind of, right? So I think I might have this wrong. I don't remember exactly, but it's sort of can you see it? So it has it's like a P with an L.
Yeah.
Kind of hard with this virtual background, which is really, really great, by the way. And all thanks, thank you, Eleni. Her virtual background screen isn't working very well, so she let me use her background. This is Pluto, one of the best pictures we have today. Thank you to New Horizons. That spacecraft there is what took that wonderful picture. And then in the background is Pluto's largest moon, Charon, or Charon, or I don't know how you pronounce it. So the story behind the moon's name, which is kind of confusing, is Charon is the Greek or the Roman name for the guy who brings people over the river Styx on the boat, I think. I might have my
Yeah, it's
mythology
Greek.
wrong.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. So he's like Hades' companion, sort of, right? So it makes sense. But the guy who discovered the moon, his wife's name was Sharon. So he's like, okay, you can name it Charon, but you need to pronounce it Sharon. So that's why, who knows how to pronounce that moon? I don't know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so however you want, that's fine. And I can't help but notice, Eleni, that you called Pluto a planet.
Yes.
That's
At the time.
yes,
it
at the
was.
time, right? Pluto was
But
a planet for 60, 70 years, something like that. And so Pluto's orbit, because it's so far away from the sun, its orbit's something like 270 years. I should probably look these numbers up.
yeah, it's 200 some years. I think it's around 240 or 250.
Okay,
I
yeah.
think.
It's in that ballpark. And so it was only a planet for less than one Pluto year. Right?
Wow. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, so it had its moment, but we still love Pluto. It's still fascinating, and for those out there who are still upset about Pluto's demotion, or maybe don't quite understand the story there, because I think it is an interesting story. Pluto is now called a dwarf planet, not just a planet. So we have 8 planets now, although when I was in grade school and learned the planets, there were 9, just like many of you. But in 2006, I think it was the International Astronomical Union, international groups came together and discussed, based on the latest findings and understanding of astronomy, what is a planet? So they had this sort of philosophical conversation about what is a planet. And that the definition of that word has changed over time. The word planet means wandering star, because in ancient times, when it just looked like there were these bright objects in the sky, like really bright stars, that moved across the background of fixed stars. So the ancient Romans and many other cultures just assumed that they were stars. They look like stars. If you go out at night and you see Venus or Jupiter or Saturn with your eyes, it looks like a bright star that moves. So they thought that there were gods that were controlling these stars, and it was like those planets or those wandering stars were homes, and gods controlled them and moved them across the skies. So that's where we get the word. It's not even that really accurate to what we understand now, when we understand that our sun is a star and that these are objects moving around that star. So as we started to understand a little bit more of this stuff, we had to sort of redefine what the word planet meant. And I think that definition has changed a few times in its history. But in 2006, the AIU at least determined that there had to be 3 criteria for something to be a planet. It had to go around a star. Okay, Pluto does this. Pluto orbits our sun, the star. It has to be big enough that it reaches hydrostatic equilibrium, which is a fancy word for round. It has to do with gravity, right? So if something is big enough in space, gravity will kind of put pressure all around it and make it round, like when you compact a snowball, right? If you eventually you can make that round. So hydrostatic equilibrium, Pluto's got that. Check. That's 2. The third criteria is that the object in question does not share its orbit with other objects, and that's where Pluto fails the planet test. Pluto lives in what we call the Kuiper Belt. It's a far out in the solar system of icy rocks. So you think in the middle of our solar system, well, between Mars's orbit and Jupiter's orbit is the asteroid belt. There actually is a dwarf planet that lives in the asteroid belt. We have the largest asteroid in the asteroid belt is called Ceres, and it's round. It orbits
It
the
was
sun.
initially a planet, by the way. It was initially considered one of the major planets in addition to 3 other things in the asteroid belt. So those used to be planets too.
How do you know how long Ceres was a planet?
I'm not sure. It wasn't very long. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always got me, is that the number of planets we have in our solar system has changed quite a lot. I blame Disney. People don't want to let Pluto go as a planet because Disney named it, an adorable puppy after the planet.
Yeah.
We all fell in love with that. I love Pluto. It's still one of my favorite things in our solar system.
Me too. But I think it's really cool that Pluto is responsible for our definition of a planet. And like you said, there's still controversy about it. Just a couple years ago at the 48th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, that's the biggest conference in the world, I think, for this type of science. The New Horizons team was there and they were trying to argue that Pluto should be considered a planet again. But in addition to that, based on their new criteria, we would have had to define over 100 other solar system objects as planets. So that's how dead set some people are on
Oh
keeping
my
Pluto
goodness.
as a planet. But we've discovered so many other objects in the Kuiper Belt and in the asteroid belt that are also round, just like Pluto. So if we called Pluto a planet, technically we would have to call all those other things planets too, which for most people that's a deal breaker, but apparently for the New Horizons team, you just want to name all these things planets so Pluto can stay a planet.
I've had so many people come in the planetarium and they're like, my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas, right? Because we learned that mnemonic to remember the order of the planets. And I'm thinking in my head, it's just as easy to say my very educated mother just served us nachos.
Yes.
Right. Or something, right? We can get around one less, but you're right. Like what mnemonic could you possibly have for 100 planets?
Right. That would be a lot to learn in school.
The first planetarium that I worked in, I worked under a guy. I guess I won't say his name, but I love him to death. I love him dearly. He's been one of my greatest mentors in life. But he is a huge Pluto planet proponent. And, I think it's an interesting debate. I guess I don't really pick sides or anything, but Pluto is a planet, and he works in the field. He works in astronomy education. And, I pick at him. For years, I picked at him about it. And I was like, if I kind of made the point you did, like, if Pluto becomes a planet, then all of these other, 100 planets, how would we deal with that? And he's like, the more the merrier. Let's bring them on.
Right.
So it's interesting. I don't see a reason to complain too much. A dwarf planet still has the word planet in it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and some people even call them Plutoids in honor of Pluto. They call the entire class of objects Plutoids.
Oh, instead of dwarf planet.
Yeah.
I like that.
But another thing that a lot of people don't know is we didn't know much of anything about Pluto until a couple of years ago.
With New
Thanks
Horizons.
to the New Horizons mission, which is behind Tiffany, that spacecraft there. And another interesting thing about that is that it also launched in 2006 before Pluto was renamed as a dwarf planet.
Like a few months. So when this spacecraft left Earth to head to Pluto was still a planet. So when it got its funding and it was being built and it was launched into space, we're going to planet Pluto. And then on its way, it's like, wait.
Not a planet anymore.
But the mission was so incredibly important and it was so successful. That's why we have this picture over here. And you see that little, we call that the Sputnik planum. Because we named it Sputnik Planitia and I memorized that. And then we renamed it Sputnik planum because I think that more accurately describes the geographical features. But anyway, it looks like a heart. Literally, it's adorable.
Yes, it's so cute.
How can you not love that? That little world. My favorite thing about New Horizons over here. So this is enlarged. Of course, it's not larger than the planet, dwarf planet Pluto. It's about the size of a grand piano, like one of the really big pianos that professionals use. This is not actually very big, but it is the fastest spacecraft ever built.
Wow.
Yeah. So it traveled on average around 11 miles per second.
Wow.
Yeah. And it gained that speed through some planet flybys. You sort of swing around a planet, use gravity to gain some speed. It took New Horizons 9 years to reach Pluto, going that speed. But Pluto's really far away. It's like 4 billion miles from Earth. So yeah, even something super fast. If you build a spacecraft, you want to do your research, right? You want to be able to do it in your lifetime. So that was part of the challenge of getting to Pluto. Is you wanted to build something fast enough that it could reach there in a scientist's career time.
Yeah, and another thing about that heart-shaped feature that we found out thanks to New Horizons is that heart is actually a giant glacier. It's the biggest glacier, the biggest known glacier in the solar system. And that was super surprising to us because we thought that Pluto was cold and dead and boring, and it's actually super interesting and super active. We could tell this glacier is relatively new, relatively young, because it doesn't have many craters on it. And when you think of glacier, you think of water ice, and it does have some water ice in it, but it's mostly frozen nitrogen. It's so cold on Pluto that nitrogen, which is a gas in our atmosphere,
it's the most common gas in our atmosphere.
Yes.
Yeah.
It not only turns to liquid, but it solidifies to a solid. It freezes, and that tells us that it is really, really cold.
Yeah. Incredibly cool. I didn't know that about it being the largest glacier.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
1,000 kilometers wide. It's
Oh
huge.
my goodness. And there's some areas, I'm not exactly sure where, like maybe on the outskirts of the heart, where it's like lakes of liquid, maybe liquid nitrogen or liquid methane or something.
That's another really interesting thing about Pluto is they don't know if it's now or in the past, but they think there has been liquid standing bodies of water at some point on Pluto in Pluto's past, which is huge. The only other bodies in the solar system that do that are Earth, Saturn's largest moon, Titan, and probably Mars in the past. So that is really fascinating. We did not think that could happen this far out in the solar system.
Yeah, it's really cool. And gosh, there's some breathtaking photos from New Horizons. It was able to get really close to Pluto and take some really detailed photographs of its surface. And like Eleni said, we thought it was just gonna be this boring old, like, crater pocked ice ball, because we just didn't think a lot was going to be changing on it. It's so far out, there's not going to be anything going on with it. But a lot of the areas are smooth. There's these glaciers. There are mountain ranges, and they are like on the right, kind of where my finger is right there. Mountain ranges that are as tall as the Rocky Mountains on Earth, but made of water ice. So the kind of ice that's in your drink, think about a mountain as large as the Rockies made out of that. What? That's physically impossible on Earth, even if you have the temperatures. It's too big. But because Pluto's a little bit smaller, that I guess can happen. And just the photos are stunning.
Yeah, and because of that, we think that Pluto used to have volcanoes that shot out freezing cold water, very, very cold water, and then it would come back on the surface and freeze into water ice, and that's how we got these mountains. And scientists think that there's likely a liquid water ocean beneath Pluto's surface. So just like Europa and other icy moons in the solar system, even Pluto might have a liquid water ocean that's a few kilometers thick beneath its surface. So that's really cool too. We did not expect that either.
And so New Horizons also checked out the Pluto's largest moon, Charon. And you can see it in this picture, but you have to look kind of close. There's a huge crack. So there's a red red region on the moon, and then but there's also this huge crack or I guess ravine on Charon, and what looks like happened, it was something huge, something really big hit the moon and almost ripped it apart. So it sustained a massive impact and survived. It's not the only moon around Pluto. So we know of 5 now. And that's another thing we didn't know before, before New Horizons launched. We learned a lot about Pluto in those 9 years getting there. But go ahead.
You just reminded me of another really cool thing that New Horizons figured out with Pluto and its moons. So New Horizons was able to date Pluto's moons to figure out when they all formed, and they all formed at the exact same time. So scientists think that all of Pluto's moons formed when something in the Kuiper Belt struck Pluto. So Pluto used to be a lot bigger, and then it broke up into pieces, and that's how Pluto got its 5 moons. And also, Charon, the largest moon, is the largest moon with respect to its parent body in the solar system.
Yeah.
It's 1/8 of the size of Pluto. Very, very big compared to the size of Pluto, that's also super interesting. That's just very, very rare for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, based on what we know about dwarf planets, which we're still learning a lot, there's a very valid argument to say that Pluto and Charon are not a dwarf planet and a moon, but rather 2 dwarf planets that are orbiting each other. Because Charon is, as Eleni said, it's the largest moon to planet ratio of anything in the solar system that we know of, right? So Charon is so big that its gravitational pull pulls on Pluto. So Pluto and Charon orbit a spot somewhere between the 2, and they're orbiting the spot. They sort of do this dance in the sky. It's not a clean like moon going around a planet scenario. But I don't know that everyone's ready to hear that. So if you don't like it, it doesn't matter, because Pluto is really, really cool. I don't care what you call it. I don't care what you call Charon. It's still a fascinating place, and we still have so much more to learn about it. And so New Horizons here, it did a flyby of Pluto. So it's a one-way mission, right? And after it passed Pluto, it's just going to continue on through the Kuiper Belt. And NASA has purposely driven it by a few Kuiper Belt objects that we had discovered, that we've seen, and taken some photos of those. So we're learning more about the outskirts of our solar system that we really haven't been able to explore yet. It's one of my favorite NASA missions. I just love New Horizons so much.
Me too. It's so interesting, so exciting. So many unexpected things came from that mission. Not even just Pluto. It went past Jupiter. It went past some other Kuiper Belt objects, and we learned a lot of stuff.
Well, I'm not seeing any comments right now on our post, but let us know in the comments what you think about Pluto, what your favorite thing is about our dwarf planet in the Kuiper Belt. And if we don't have any questions here in the next few seconds, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Is there any other interesting things that you like about Pluto, Eleni?
Sorry, I got distracted. Kurt asked a question. Why is the Kuiper Belt there? Very good question.
Well, if he asked, he probably knows the answer.
True.
Oh gosh. I don't know. Do you know? I feel like I did know and I forgot.
Yeah, it has to do with the solar system formation. I think I don't know if this is correct, but this is my planetary scientist coming out. If I had to guess, it's because those Kuiper Belt objects, their composition is not like the asteroid belt objects. The asteroid belt objects are more rocky, whereas the outer Kuiper Belt objects are more what we call icy, but really they're solidified volatiles. Volatiles are things that evaporate easily when they're warm, when they're close to the sun. So these things need to be really far away from the sun to condense. So I'm guessing that has something to do with it, that these
So they survive
materials,
because they're so far away.
yeah, they can't be much closer to the sun or they would just evaporate. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. I'm sorry, I can't give a better answer.
No, I think that's great. I mean, because that's kind of what happens with comets, right? Like they come in, they have these highly elliptical orbits, so they're really, really far out in our solar system, and then they come in close to the sun, and they start to evaporate and slough off some of their gas and material, and then that's what we see. That's why we see those big, beautiful comet tails in our sky when we have a comet in the sky. I will say about in terms of planet formation, in my defense, we really don't know a lot about planet formation in general. We assumed, because we have an example of one, and scientists would say an N of one, and we all, if we're scientists, we know an N of one is very problematic. But we know of one solar system, exactly one. So it's really not fair to assume that other solar systems are like ours, but if it's the only one we know of, I guess that's the only assumption we can make, right? So we kind of assumed that if there were other planets around stars, that they would form similar to our solar system, where the smaller, rockier planets were towards the sun and the larger gaseous planets were towards the outer edge. But the first planets that we found were all hot Jupiters, which are gaseous planets the size of Jupiter that are very close to their star. Now that's sort of an information bias based on how we were observing these exoplanets, planets that are orbiting other stars. So, but what we're seeing is that the many of the solar systems we are finding out there that aren't ours, that are forming around other stars, are not exactly looking like ours. So all of these ideas of how planets form around stars, we're realizing there's a lot that we don't know, a lot still to learn. As I think planetary science is really cool.
Me too.
So Eleni is a senior here
Yes.
at YSU. She's going to be going to grad school soon to be studying some of this stuff.
Yes, I will be going for a PhD in planetary science. I'm super excited. Hopefully, I would love to study Pluto sometime. Right now, my research is about Saturn's largest moon, Titan, but apparently
Maybe we
Titan's
should
not
do one
all that
about
different
Titan
from
because
Pluto.
so
That would
cool.
be fun. Titan is really neat. I'm biased, but Titan is so cool.
All right. Well, I actually didn't see Kurt's comment at all. Oh, okay. I see a couple here. How tall are the ice mountains on Pluto? Some of them are taller than the Rockies here on Earth. They're huge.
Someone shared an interesting fact about Pluto that I forgot. Russia, the country of Russia, has a larger surface area than Pluto. Thanks, Heather, for that. That's a really cool fact. Pluto,
Yeah, that's a great way to sort of conceptualize the size of Pluto. Absolutely. Thank you. Leftovers, that's what Kurt was saying, is that the Kuiper Belt objects are sort of leftovers of the leftover material of the solar system.
Right.
We kind of think of the asteroid belt like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people have said that it might be like a planet that was ripped apart. I'm not sure if that was debunked or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know that, I don't know how people know this, but scientists have figured out, who are looking for exoplanets, have figured out that other star systems, other planetary systems, also have like distant regions of lots and lots of icy bodies. I don't know how they figured that out. I wish I did. I should look into that.
Yeah,
But
that's really cool.
I did read that somewhere when I was doing my research. So that's interesting also.
Okay, I'm seeing your oh, hi Renee. I'm seeing some of your comments now. I guess I wasn't looking in the right place. So let me make sure that there's no other questions. Ceres was a planet for nearly 75 years. Thank you, Kurt.
Wow,
So
I did not know that.
So about as long, or maybe longer than Pluto, right? About as long.
Yeah.
The seas of ice are so cool. I agree, Ashley. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. If you have any ideas about what other conversations you'd like to have with us, it really could be kind of anything, a moon, a planet, black holes, whatever, just anything that you think is interesting that you'd like to hear more about. Please let us know in the comments because we'd love to hear from you. We're really wanting to make these sort of more casual, and we're not purposefully not planning them because we want to hear from you and just sort of roll with it. So let us know what you think. Otherwise, I guess we'll sign off for now.
Yeah, check out our Keep Looking Up this weekend on Saturday.
Thank you, Eleni. Great plug. Yes, we have a Keep Looking Up. We're going to be introducing astrophotography. More specifically, our guest speaker, Jody McCullough. She's going to be, if you're interested in what is this astrophotography and how could you get started in something like that, taking pictures of the night sky. We'll cover that this Saturday at 8 o'clock.
Yep, see you there.
Till next time. See you later. Oh, I need to